Hey folks, this is Keough with a new training video for you. You're going to see me do some deadlifting, a whole bunch of deadlifting. Did 475 for a cluster set, which ended up actually taking me 4 minutes to do. Was able to get a set of 12, which is a PR off the floor, but a long set and not an easy one. Did 2 sets of 5 with 455, so some sub-max work, 10 total reps in there. And after that, I ended up doing 405 for 2 sets of 15 off of some blocks, really just trying to work on my lockout. As you see on this day, I ended up actually setting my hips a little bit lower. I've been watching some recent deadlifting footage of myself over the last month, and I haven't been happy with my hip position. I feel like I'm getting back to set my hips a little bit too high. So I tried to set my hips a little bit lower, and that was to sacrifice some speed off the floor in order to make my lockout easier. And I'm also trying to protect this SI joint, and I just feel a little bit better when I'm setting my hips a little bit lower. So it isn't, I think, my strongest position right now, but this is really where my hips were set when I pulled 601 of my last meet. So I want to continue to try and encourage that change in my technique. So I was working on here. I was really trying to pull back a little bit more and keep my shoulders behind the bar. So it is something I'm conscious of. I'm not necessarily taking the slack out of the bar when I'm pulling, but my pull on this day was not quite as violent as it usually is. I wasn't snapping into it off the bottom, so sacrificing some speed off the floor in order to maintain position and make my lockout easier. I have a lot of time for this video because this video is going to end up being something like 8.5 minutes long, and I got asked a question recently about my deadlift speed off the floor and how you produce speed off the floor, because I'm a deadlifter who, obviously I use a conventional stance, but I'm also a deadlifter who produces a lot of speed off the floor, and then somewhere 4 or 5 inches, maybe less than that, maybe 3 or 4 inches, past my knees, I really slow down right before lockout. And so the question was directed at me, and it was basically, how do you train rate of force development? And my way of answering that question is, it's not necessarily something that you train. It absolutely is something that you train, but it also has a lot to do with your leverages, and it also has to do with your setup. And I use a setup that is conducive to generating bar speed off the floor. And so I think when you break down the when you break down the deadlift into how leverages function and how those leverages produce either optimal conditions for bar speed off the floor or an easy lockout, what you'll find is that the best pullers off the floor all use a style that's basically antithetical or opposite to the best pullers who have a really strong lockout. Okay, so if you look at the best conventional pullers, they're all really fast off the floor. They all share certain characteristics. They all pull with a narrow stance. Okay, narrow stance not only gives you better leverage in order to move that bar off the floor, but the narrower your stance is, the more your knees are going to have to track forward. Okay, and you find that a lot of really good pullers off the floor, really fast pullers off the floor, are pullers with really long femurs, so that their knees can basically track way over the bar. As long as they're able to get their knees out of the way, they are able to just generate a lot of bar speed. So really fast pullers off the floor are they're gonna usually have longer femurs, which are gonna allow them to take a narrower stance and let their knees track in front of the bar and over their toes, which is, I know, it's when you're learning to deadlift, this is something that people tell you not to do. Don't let your knees track too far forward, but it will make the deadlift easier breaking the bar off the floor if you do that. They'll also pull with their hips higher, and they'll also pull with a rounded thoracic. Okay, and that rounded thoracic with your hips higher is going to allow you better leveraging to break that bar off the floor. Now, the problem with this setup is once you get the bar past your knees, you have a rounded thoracic, you have knees that are tracked forward, you have hips that are kind of, your pelvis is posteriorly tilted, So it's pulled under you, and your hips are therefore not in a good position at all to be engaged in the movement. And so really what happens is you sacrifice positioning at lockout in order to produce more speed off the floor. The best lifters with the best lockouts, if we can put it in these terms, in the sport of powerlifting are almost all usually wide stance sumo pullers, okay, who really struggle to break the bar off the floor. But it's, again, basically the setup is antithetical to a narrow stance conventional deadlifter with really good leverages for deadlifting. So knees are way out, hips are over the bar, but hips are positioned over the bar by a really strong abduction. Torso position is vertical and the torso is straight. Okay, no rounding of the back. If you watch Hosdev or Belayev, if you watch these guys pull sumo, basically vertical torso position when they pull. And if they're going to miss a lift, they're going to miss it off the floor. You know, if they lock out a lift, the lockout is always really fast. For the conventional pullers that are really fast at lockout, knees don't track forward. They sit back on their pulls. They usually take a wider stance. They'll turn their toes out a little bit more. That'll allow you to engage your hip flexors more once you get that bar past your knees. And they also keep a good neutral spine when they deadlift. Okay, and they try and keep their shoulders over the bar, or even try and get their shoulders a little bit behind the bar, but usually shoulders directly in line with the barbell instead of in front of the barbell, which is how I like to pull. And these are deadlifters who really struggle to break the bar off the floor, but once they get it past their knees, they'll always lock it out fast. Richard Hawthorne's an example of this. This is basically his setup. And so what you want to do, the first fix for either developing bar speed or fixing a lockout is to look at your technique, look at your strength curve. If you're really slow off the floor, start to move your feet in a little bit, pull with your hips a little higher, let your thoracic round a little bit more, let your knees track forward a little bit more, turn your feet in a little bit more, so deadlift so that your toes are pointing a little bit more forward. Start to change your leverages or change your style of deadlifting so that you're in just simply a better leverage position to produce speed off the floor. And see how that works. Maybe it'll have a positive difference, maybe it won't. Maybe your issue is literally a weakness that you have to address. But in my experience, a lot of weaknesses in deadlifting just get misdiagnosed. Technique matters so much to rate of force development in deadlifting. It's hugely important. I mean, you can see how easy it is for me to lock out weights on these block pulls with 405. It's really fast, and that's because of, at least in part, because of the positioning I'm putting myself in with these block pulls. It's just much easier for me to lock out weights. Anyway, keep checking in. Thanks for watching if you watched all of it. I know this is a long video, but what the hell. Keep checking in. More videos for you soon.